Hello and welcome to Today in Geography, a podcast produced by the Department of Geography, Environment, and Spatial Sciences at Michigan State University. Each episode, we talk with members of our community about their research and interests, and then we spend some time spotlighting events and celebrations that have shaped the field of geography. I'm Nathan Moore, an associate professor in the department, and your host for an engaging exploration of people, places, and stories that shape our world. Today, we are marking Native American Heritage Month, an observance in November to celebrate the history, culture, and contributions of American Indian and Alaska Native peoples. The month-long recognition, established in 1990, is an opportunity to learn about Indigenous communities, their traditions, and the challenges they face. But more about that later in our show. First, I am joined by Angie Sanchez, a PhD student in our department. Angie, thanks for joining us today.
Sure. Thank you for having me. I'll just do an introduction that I would if I was in my own community talking to folks. So, Buju, Ajanikwe, Indigenous, Ajajak and Dodem, Gachi, Wikwe Dong, Donjaba, Ojibwe, Minwa, Odawakwe, and now. So, what I said was just introduce my spirit name, my Anishinaabe name, where I'm from, and what my clan is. And when we are in the spaces with other Indigenous people, we usually introduce ourselves in our languages in the way that we traditionally would, just so that we can kind of help relate ourselves to the other folks in the room.
Oh, great. Thanks. Yeah. Well, that's a good jumping off point for my first question. How did your life sort of unfold? What are some big experiences that led you to think, I should apply for a PhD program in geography?
So, starting from when I was very young, I kind of grew up. I didn't know that I wanted a PhD until a few years ago. But I did know that I wanted to have an education. I grew up in a household, I'm just a kid from the res in northern Michigan. And I grew up in a household that, was a little bit rough at times. And I knew from a very young age that I didn't want to continue that cycle, and I wanted to do better. And somehow through, whether it was my own tribe or other folks, I learned about the Michigan Indian tuition waiver, which is a whole other topic you could talk about. My Uncle Paul Johnson was responsible for getting that legislation passed so that Indigenous folks in the state of Michigan can get their education covered. It's a treaty responsibility that the state has with the Indigenous folks of Michigan, and the state wasn't living up to that, and he charged them with living up to it. Oh, yeah, and so from very young, like 10, 11, 12, I knew that I could go to school. I just needed to make sure that I could get to school, so I kind of stayed on the straight and narrow as I was growing up, and then I was introduced actually to Michigan State through a program back in the day. It was called, I think it was called Michigan, I forgot the name of it, but it was a camp. It was a summer camp for Indigenous kids. And it started by Eva Menifee, who just retired from like many, many years of service at Lansing Community College. And she started this camp here, and her whole purpose of starting this camp was to just show Native kids that to see themselves in college.
You can do it.
You can do this. And so, for my younger teenage years, we came to camp a few years, and she moved it around between MSU and 1 year at Ferris. But it was here mostly. And that was my first time being on campus, and just like, oh, wow, I had no idea. And then my aunt, who was my mom's youngest sister, became a student here. And I was at this point now like 15, so I was a little bit older as a teenager. And I got to come down and visit her in her dorm, and I thought it was really cool, and knew that was what I wanted to do. So I just spent my high school career making sure that I was getting good enough grades so that I could get into Michigan State. So then came here, did all the things, went home, worked for a while, decided I got a bachelor's degree in communications, but I wasn't really sure what I was going to do with that. I went home and I worked for my tribe's casinos for a while, and decided that I wanted out of that as well, but I I at the time wanted to stay in the business world, but I didn't have a business degree. And so I knew in order to be competitive, I needed to get a business degree. So I came back to MSU and got an MBA and graduated with that in 2014. And then I was working in corporate America for a little bit, and then also decided that that was not for me. But I also, my husband and I, we weren't married at the time, but we had decided that we wanted to have a baby. And so I had a baby very, very late in life. And there was, quite a bit of complications during my pregnancy, but then also afterward. And he was a very sick baby when he was first born. He almost did not survive. And he obviously he did, thankfully. But for a while there, it was touch and go. And I knew once I got pregnant that so basically a lot of Indigenous folks will receive kind of instructions from ancestors. Like you get told things, here's what you have to do. And me having a baby was one of those things. And breastfeeding him was also another one of those things. And it's just kind of a thing that you're just like, oh, okay, I this is what I have to do. I thought it would be easy because people have been doing it for hundreds of thousands of years. But what I learned is that breastfeeding is actually, it is kind of human nature, but it's also a learned act. And because I grew up in a time when I didn't breastfeed, none of my siblings were breastfed. I've never saw it as a child growing up. I didn't learn anything about it.
A community role.
Yes, 100%. Breastfeeding is a community responsibility. And so, anyway, turns out my son had a tongue tie that was making it difficult for him to be efficient at pulling milk out. And so his weight gain was slow and it was very painful. And I reached out for help. I'm one of those people that when you kind of tell me that I can't do something, I'm very oh no, I'm going to do it.
I'm listening. This is very true.
Yeah, I'm going to do it. And also you're going to watch me do it. And so I just started on this journey of trying to figure out what was going on. I knew something was wrong, but I kept being kind of dismissed by healthcare providers or lactation consultants, IBCLCs. I went to free lactation help. I went to paid lactation help. And it was the gist every time was, his latch looks fine. I don't know. I don't see anything wrong. And I was like, but something is wrong. I know that there's something is wrong. And then it turns out just by stroke of luck, I kind of figured out the problem on my own because I was on Facebook at the right time, learned about a tongue tie, learned how tongue ties can restrict the oral function of a baby's mouth. And so then we got it corrected. And after that, everything was great. But then I started thinking about it. And now I'm having a normal breastfeeding journey with my son. And I got lots of time to think instead of worrying about pumping and making sure he's getting enough milk and all these other things. And I started thinking about my own community members and how I wonder how many of them also their babies had a tongue tie and they didn't have help, and how difficult it was for me to get help. And I know, but they wouldn't push as hard as I would because I have zero shame and zero, I'm just going to do it. And so I just kind of started reaching out to folks.
I might call that moral clarity, but yeah.
And I started reaching out to folks, just kind of gathering anecdotal evidence. And every single one of my community members that I asked that had had a baby said the same thing. There was one of two answers, that they had all had a baby and they had all tried to breastfeed, but they quit very quickly within anywhere from a day to a week. And the reasons for that was that they weren't making enough milk and they didn't have anybody to go to, or they didn't know what they were doing and they didn't have anybody to go to. And I was like, that is a problem because there are resources out there, but there's a reason why our people are not using them. So then I started wondering about that. Why is there lactation help available, but my community members are not using it? And I wanted to investigate that. And in order to do that, I needed a health degree. And so one of my friends who is a physical geographer, I told him about coming back to school and I was like, but I need a health degree, but I don't know how to do that because the only thing I can think of is a master's in public health. But if I'm going to go back to school, I don't want to get a second master's degree. I already have a master's degree. I'm not going to go to med school. I'm not going to become a nurse, right? So those were the things that I knew of. I knew I needed a health degree, but I didn't really know how I was going to do it. And he suggested one day, I was over at his house, can I interest you in a PhD in health and medical geography? And I was like, what is that? And we sat down, he opened up his laptop and we started looking up like research and dissertations. And he was like, oh, it's really good. Like there's nobody really doing this work. You should check it out. And so then he was like, all right, well, where do you want to go? And I was like, I knew it had to be a public school in Michigan because that's the only place that the Michigan Indian tuition waiver applies. And he's like, well, you live in East Lansing right now. You might as well go back to Michigan State. And so I was like, sure. And so he got on the GEO website and looked up health geographers, found Sue's profile and was like, look at the work that she's doing. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's exactly what I need. And so then a week later, I had, the next day, actually, I emailed Sue, introduced myself. Yep, Sue Grady, who's now my advisor. And then like 2 weeks later, I was in her office meeting with her, telling her, it was very quick, telling her what I wanted to do. And I think she was very moved by my story and was like, I've been wanting somebody to do this work for many years and I would love to have you here. Let's get to work on getting you an application into the PhD program in geography at MSU. And then one thing after another, and a couple months later, I'm submitting my application to start a PhD program with a 2-year-old baby.
But if you want the thing, you certainly go for it.
Yes, exactly.
So let's look at tell us a little bit about your research. Like, how did you start with it? And then where is it now?
So the main questions that I wanted to ask in the beginning were, I really just wanted to investigate, like, what is this true? Is this really happening? Or was this just my community where folks were not able to breastfeed or not able to have the breastfeeding journey that they wanted. And so when I got here, I just started looking up for, like, whatever data I could find. And, let me cut back to look. So I get admitted, you get admitted in the spring, right? Early spring, something like that. I had just so happened to been talking to friends and folks on Facebook about the work, and I wanted to do this work. But I wasn't really sure how I was going to do it. I knew that I was going to start the PhD, but I still didn't really know how or what I was going to do it. The Intertribal Council of Michigan is a nonprofit organization. It's based out of Sault Ste. Marie, Michigan, and they kind of do a lot of work for all the tribes in Michigan, where maybe it's work that needs to be done at the tribe, but the tribe can't necessarily do it themselves. Like, they can't fully fund a position to do it. So it's kind of a separate organization. They apply for grants, and then they do this work amongst all the tribes in the state of Michigan. And so they were having a training, and it was called the Indigenous Lactation Counselor Training. And it was a 5-day, 45-hour foundational lactation training. And so I learned about that, and I was like, sweet, sign me up. I didn't really know what I was getting into. And I walked in, and this was in May of 2019. And I walked in, and these two Indigenous women, one is Cammie Goldhammer, and then she calls her breastie, her best friend, Kimberly Moore Salas, who's a Dene, and Cammie is Dakota. Cammie's from Seattle, Kim's from Arizona, and they were two at the time of like maybe 5 or 6 Indigenous IBCLCs, which are International Board Certified Lactation Consultants, which is in the health world considered the gold standard of lactation knowledge. Cammie knew that there isn't a single of the like 25,000 IBCLCs in the United States. There isn't a single one that is able to fully, completely counsel one of my community members, because they don't know about where we come from. They don't know about our histories. They don't know how to work with our people. And she was like, and also, we don't really need these certifications to do this work because we have generational knowledge. We have knowledge that's been passed down from generation to generation. And she's like, and I want to kind of help restore that in Indigenous communities.
Well, it was sort of lost there, you said,
Yeah.
with your generation.
Yep. Well, many, right? It started with the boarding schools, and where all of our families were ripped apart. All of our children were taken from us starting in the late 1800s all the way up to the last school, like in Michigan, closed in 94, I think. Last boarding school.
Wow.
And babies were taken as young as, 6 months from families and put in these boarding schools. And so now imagine entire communities that are childless. There's no kids there because the government or church representatives came in and took their babies forcefully. You'll see in a lot of the, history books that people will say that the Indigenous folks willingly gave up their kids, but it was
That's 100% not true.
It was 100% not true. They of course signed their children over, but it was because of force of, it was a threat. If you don't, you're going to go to jail, or, these things are going to happen. And also they were told a lie about what was happening at the school. So a lot of folks did sign their children over thinking, this is going to be great for my child, when it turns out it was nothing but horrors. And so we have all these communities now across the United States and Canada of Indigenous folks, where we're as young people, we're growing up in a boarding school. So we're not seeing what our community members are doing. We're not learning the culture and traditions that we should have been learning. And breastfeeding is a part of that. And so many generations of folks kind of lost that breastfeeding knowledge because
over a century.
Yeah, because you just didn't grow up seeing it in your families, or your communities. Okay, so Cammie decided that she wanted to write her own program so that she could counsel Indigenous folks to be able to do lactation care in their own communities, because she fully believes, and I do too now because of being one of her students, that we have this knowledge. And it's all up like ancestrally. It's in our blood. It's in our blood memory. And she wanted to connect that to our hearts, which is where all of that love and connection and emotion and everything comes through. And that's a big part of breastfeeding and lactation. And it's not just about feeding your baby. And so
a very different way of talking about ancestral communication than you find in sort of the dominant culture.
Yep. So she started this, and we were that class in May of 2019. I can't remember, but it was very early on. I want to say we were like maybe her 5th class. She's now taught, I don't even know, 30 different communities all over the United States, Canada, Hawaii, Guam. And then in spring, in the early winter, actually, they're going to Australia to go teach over there. So I took this course, and on the first day, everybody did introductions, and you kind of talk about why you're there. And the first day is really meant about learning about each other and discussing generational trauma and how that's really affecting us all. And by lunchtime of that day, I literally stood up and I said, "Oh my God, this is amazing. I didn't know that this existed. I didn't know that we could do this. I don't know how I'm going to do it, but I just got accepted into the PhD program at Michigan State. I'm going to figure out a way to bring you guys back here because I want you to do this, but I want more of my community members to do this. Don't know how I'm going to do it, but I'll figure it out." And everybody just kind of chuckled, right? Because it was like, yeah, but they don't know me. And so I started that fall of 2019. And the chair at the time was
Alan Arbogast.
Ellen, sorry. It was Alan. And Alan sent us, he got an email from a grant opportunity, and he sent it to me and Sue. And it came from Michigan Health Endowment Fund. And it was a healthy, foods kind of grant is what it was geared towards. And I was like, hey, breast milk is the first food.
Close enough to
it's
the
the
grant,
first best food. Let's apply for it. And so we did. And we applied for we were awarded $338,000. And I wrote into the grant that Cammie and Kim were going to come back to Michigan 6 times. They come to 6 different communities. However, also this was the first time I ever wrote a grant. Also, I didn't talk to Cammie and Kim about it. So,
Surprise.
when we got approved, I was like, oh crap. I have to call Cammie and Kim and be like, I need you to clear your schedule because I need you to come to Michigan 6 times, which is a very difficult thing because they schedule out like 2 years in advance. It's very, it's not a thing that you can just like be like, hey, can you come I have money. Can you come to my community next month? Nope. They're booked solid. But kind of, it worked out. I'm one of those, me and Cammie are both that way. Like things just always work out, and it worked out. And they came to Michigan, in the summer of 22, and we did, 5 trainings, then one like a webinar kind of series, that we did and then posted on my website. That's still there for folks to listen to and learn from. And so, that's kind of where it started. And then my research has really just been more investigating how we can make that connection better, how we can get more folks that want to breastfeed to be able to breastfeed, and what's causing us to not be able to have the breastfeeding relationships that we want.
So a lot of the times when we think about geography, we think, oh, we're making maps. That's what geographers do, right? They make maps. But there's a lot more about flows of information and community connections. And can you tell me a little bit about what your work is in terms of those information flows and building new connections?
Yeah, one aspect of geography. So me coming to this PhD, I think I took 1 geography class in undergrad.
Well, you sort of had a lifelong
But I did have yes, right?
exposure to geographic problems.
I just didn't, know what that meant. And so when I started this program, I was very, I just didn't know a whole lot about geography. And I learned very quickly about how many things can become a geography kind of problem. Like I am actually probably now an expert in it. I can probably turn anybody's problem into a geography problem because of what the things that I've learned. Geography really does touch on aspects of people's lives that they don't realize that they're,
It's where and why.
Yeah. And so, when it came to breastfeeding, we started looking at data. So it's a history of data. So we're looking at the time span of like breastfeeding rates in Indigenous communities over the course of time from data that we could pull like from, CDC
surveys from
surveys,
ACEs
yes.
and so forth.
Yeah. And so we started looking at that, and then Sue was like, oh, we can get the Michigan vital statistics records, which is data that the state of Michigan takes for all births that take place in the state of Michigan in all the hospitals. And they have information in there like around breastfeeding. Did they initiate breastfeeding? Yes or no, or unknown? Did they plan to breastfeed? So did they come in to give birth and at some point say to the nurse or whoever that they were planning to breastfeed? Yes, no, or unknown. Or did they not plan? Like, did they say, no, I'm not, or they didn't have any plans whatsoever, right? And so she had kind of talked to me about how, you can make maps from that. And I was like, what? How can you make maps from that? And so, the data, because of that data has everything about the person who gave birth, the baby, and also the father of the baby, if that information is known, where they live, where they come from, whatever. So we were able to tie that data to like census tract data to where these folks were coming from. So the data that you can kind of pull from these vital statistics records has information about demographics, like racial demographics, ethnicity demographics, but then also income, education, and other health issues that kind of relate to pregnancy, like hypertension or gestational hypertension, diabetes, gestational diabetes, all these things. And I was like, great, let's look at all of that information and see how much of that kind of hinders possibly Indigenous people from like initiating breastfeeding while they're in the hospital.
And those relationships were notably different, right?
They are, yes. Yeah. The data that Michigan has kind of compares with what the data that we pulled from, it was called, back then, it was the Healthy People 2015 results. And then there was like healthypeople2020.gov. And we pulled data from there and looked at that. And you could see that breastfeeding rates, when you divide it out by racial categories, that they declined faster for Native American people, way faster than they did for other, different races. And so I was like, well, that's what Cammie said too. You know what I mean?
And now
during that training,
in the pudding.
And there is proof, yeah. And so I wanted to kind of look at that so we were able to pull that information from the vital statistics records and kind of confirm same thing. It's very our initiation rates are healthy, right? A lot of Indigenous people will initiate breastfeeding, but then within a day or a week or two, we've quit breastfeeding because of
lack of community structure,
yes.
lack of resources, lack of, oh my God, who do I call?
Yes, this myriad of reasons. And so that's kind of the bigger picture of what it is that I'm trying to help solve with my research is getting at all these different things that are contributing to why our community members are not able to breastfeed as long as they would like, because we are initiating, we are starting it. We just might not be able to breastfeed for as long as we would like.
So if I gave you millions and millions and millions of dollars, what are a couple of the main changes that you would try to implement to address this problem in the future?
So I would first start with our own communities, which is to continue education on lactation and how it is a community responsibility. And it's if a person who wants to breastfeed and is not successful at it is through no fault of that person's. It's everybody else's. It could even be the baby's fault, right? Like the baby has a tongue tie, right? Or it's the responsibility of everybody else in the community. It could also be the system's fault. There's a reason why this person has lived their whole lives, including their generation after generation, where they have jobs where they don't get to pump at work, or they have to return to work immediately because they don't have
a system set up to allow for them to do that.
And then we all have to work, right? Like this was not a system that we lived in before. Hundreds of years ago, when a person gave birth, the entire community stepped in to help out. Families were cooking for them, making them food, hunting for them, taking care of all the other children, doing all the things so that mom and dad and baby, all they had to worry about was, feeding the baby. Everything else was taken care of. We don't have that now because these capitalist system that we live in was forced upon our people. And in order for us to survive now, we have to work. And so, there's this whole system, and then the healthcare system also doesn't help with all, there's all kinds of reasons in there why that kind of contribute to why we're not continuing to breastfeed in the ways that we want. And so, we have to try to figure out, because we're never going to be able to go back to that, right? And also, who wants to? No, I don't want to go live out in the woods in a wigwam and hunt deer. Like, I don't want to do that.
But you want to create a new system. And yes, the words I keep hearing you saying: system, community, breastfeeding.
Yeah.
Those are the three operational words.
So those are the things that we would help fix. So we would, an example, again, I'm going to talk about Cammie. She started a program in Seattle, and it's called it's a guaranteed income program. And if you're a pregnant person, and you get enrolled into the program, you get a guaranteed $1,200 a month, no questions asked. Like, here, $1,200 a month. So those folks now, instead of having to go back to work, they have income coming in so they can pay their bills. And then now all of that other stuff is lifted after them and they can take care of their communities. So I would do something like that if I had like unlimited funds.
There is a program like that, I think, in Southern Africa where it's specifically for mothers. They give the money to mothers because you can't trust the men to spend their money wisely. But it has been remarkably successful. Yep. And I'm wondering if a similar model might work here.
Yeah.
You're going to finish your PhD in not too long, and then what's the next step for you? More research in a different direction, or continuing along this line, or what are you thinking?
I think I'll always kind of do this work because as a result of doing it, we actually started a nonprofit here in Michigan called Sacred Waters Collective, and it started from a group of folks that were in that initial 2019 lactation counselor training. We kind of all hooked up on Facebook. None of us really knew each other prior to this. We all were meeting here. Me and one of my friends, Sage, she and I were freshmen together at Michigan State, and we were roommates, and that's how we met. So we've known each other for 30 years, but we were she and I were the only ones that we knew in this training. And there was like 25 other people in there. So a group of us kind of made a Facebook group, and then we just were kind of like bouncing questions off each other when we were, because birth workers in Indigenous communities pretty much do this work anyway. We just aren't getting paid for it, right? So, when somebody's having a birth, you go and you help, and like that's the expectation. And so we were continuing to do that, but now we had more resources. Now I could say, hey, so-and-so, I'm having this problem with this person I'm seeing, and I'm not really clear on what the problem is. Can you help me through it? So we were kind of bouncing like help off each other. Then we started talking about, we want to do this more, but be more intentional about it, but we need money. In order to be money, you got to have a nonprofit or somebody to work with. So then we were like, let's start a nonprofit. So we started a nonprofit.
Tell me the name
as well, Sacred Waters Collective. And so we have doulas, and one of the people that we work with is also an IBCLC, another Indigenous international board certified lactation consultant, but she's amazing. We work with her a lot. And we just do as much help as we can, with that collective. And totally forgot what was the question, where we cited.
Like, are you going to continue with this line of work?
Yes.
Or are you going to branch in a
Where I'm going.
direction?
Yes. So that collective is still doing work. We're applying for grants. We're doing little things here and there. So I'll always have that. But as far as like where I'm going to go afterwards or what I'm going to do, I don't really know. When I first came here, I think I thought I would maybe work like in the government sector, like work for the federal government, run IHS, Indian Health Services, or work for the state. But I've since done a lot of work with those folks and realized that is not for me. There's a lot of red tape, bureaucracy. It takes too long to get things done.
And you're more about connecting communities, resources.
Yeah. And I was just like, yeah, that's also not for me. Also, through this whole program, and also as a result of breastfeeding, I learned about me being on the autism spectrum and having ADHD and how that manifests and how that works in my life. And one of those things is that I don't do well being told what to do. Shocker, I know. And so I was like, yep, you can't, you got to figure out a way to kind of work for yourself or work in a way that you don't have somebody telling you what to do, because otherwise I'm just not going to, it's just not going to work. So then the thought of becoming faculty kind of came back up. And even though, yes, if you become a faculty member somewhere, yes, you have a boss, but like nobody's telling you how to do your research, right? You have things you have to do.
It rewards the stubborn of us, yes.
Yeah, but you still get to do the research that you want to do, and nobody's telling you what to do or how to do it. And so that's on the table. But if that is a thing, I really want to stay here in the Great Lakes area. This is where many Anishinaabe people live. I would like to stay there.
And community is clearly important to you.
Yes, it is. So
speaking of community, if there's a young person listening to this podcast and they're interested in geography or the kinds of problems you're talking about, how would you suggest that they think about getting involved in a master's or PhD program or even a bachelor's degree? How could they reach out to you or what?
Oh, for sure. I'm pretty accessible through social medias. I have a Facebook page, and a lot of people reach out to me through there. It's just my personal page. But then we have our Sacred Waters Collective has a website. It's called sacredwaterscollective.co. And then also doing this work and doing the research, I also built a webpage for my my research, and it's called the Noonie Project. And Noonie is the way that you say that he or she suckles at the breast in Anishinaabe language. So I kind of named that my research.
Can you spell it?
Yep, it's Nooni. Okay. So I have a website there, although at this point I'm not really paying much attention to it. However, you still can email me from there. I do get a lot of
finish your PhD.
Yes,
yeah.
I'm trying to finish my PhD. But once I'm done, I'm still going to use that website to kind of build up and be a resource for folks looking for information on lactation and all that stuff. But specifically, yes, folks could reach out to me, ask questions. I would suggest, especially if it's Indigenous folks, Indigenous kids. Most of your tribes have an education department. You could start there, ask them, who could I talk to? We could also do it like how me and Mike did when we were looking up a PhD program. We literally just went on the MSU website and looked for geography and started poking around through there, right? There's a lot of information there. I think that especially faculty anywhere, for the most part, are really generous and helpful. So if you can reach out to faculty members anywhere and just be like, hey, I have questions about getting a, bachelor's degree in geography, but I don't really know, if you're a current student, college student, and you have relationships with faculty members, or even if you don't, just reach out, get connected, because that's really, where you learn a lot and where you can kind of help make, the bigger connections to geography and how geography really applies into your life and how helpful it could be.
If there's one thing that you've learned or picked up from your geography work and that you would like the rest of the world to know, what would that idea or thought or phrase be?
Oh my gosh.
You have to answer it in 5 seconds.
Yeah.
Take your turn and think about it.
I would say the central kind of theme that comes up all the time in all of this that we're doing, the work that we're doing as a collective, but also individually in my research, but also what all the other birth workers are doing out there. We really, really, really need to trust and listen to women, because we know what we're doing. But we have all these people that are putting these thoughts in our heads that we don't know what we're doing. And it makes us question ourselves. And if we just listened more to women, and if we listened more to Anishinaabe women, the world would be a much better place.
That's an excellent thought.
Is there anything else you'd like to add about your research or about your life as a geographer to share with the world?
No, I mean, it's been very interesting. It's cool. If you'd asked me, 10 years ago, would I be super geeked about making maps? No, I would have been like, you're crazy.
But if I said spatial relationship.
Yeah. It's really cool. And it is a lot more than just making maps. And even though the maps part is cool.
Yeah.
But there's a lot here in geography, and it's really very practical and applicable to pretty much anything. So, it's a good field.
Good. Well, thanks for sitting down and talking to us today about your work and your experiences. And I know you're going to stick around and chat about the Native American Heritage Month. But first, let's take a moment for a word from our sponsor.
Are you looking to upgrade your career or gain new in-demand geospatial skills? With Michigan State University's OnGeo Professional Certificate Program, you can earn a certificate in GIS, Geographic Information Systems, or Geospatial Data Analytics and Visualization, all fully online. Designed by professional geographers, OnGeo courses help you build real GIS experience using today's latest tools and technologies. New sessions start 6 times a year. No long applications or campus commute, just practical skills you can use right away. Visit ongeo.msu.edu to register and start your GIS journey today, or find the link below in the show notes to learn more. So, Angie, we're here to talk about and celebrate Native American Heritage Month.
Mm-hmm.
So when I think about it, there's equal parts education, reflection, and giving a voice. So can you think of cases where there's a need for more education or for reflection or for giving a voice to Native peoples?
Sure. So, it's funny because growing up when I was young, so there's been this whole evolution really of what Native American Heritage Month is and what it means. When I was young, what that meant was a bunch of people would come and ask members of my community, and I was a powwow dancer. And we have lots of powwow dancers in my community, and they would ask us to come do a little show at the school. And it was the only time we were busy was November. And that for as a young child, that's really important, I think, because it's probably the only time that other folks in your school, other kids get to see where you come from and like how you might live your life. The issue with it is that there's a handful of people who are powwow people, and there's indigenous people across North America who have nothing to do with powwows, but they are like super indigenous folks. They're out there hunting, fishing, gathering, making,
Singing the songs.
singing the songs, doing the artwork, doing all the things, scraping moose hides, smoking fish. There's this whole other aspect of being indigenous that most people don't know about. And so we don't really get to see those things. And that's the cool thing about the evolution of Native American Heritage Month, because now it's not just about bringing some people in to come dance. You're bringing in other folks to talk about the language revitalization, food sovereignty, where we in our own communities are also learning about we're relearning, right? Just like with breastfeeding, we're relearning how to grow our traditional foods, how to harvest them, how to make them. And so these are things that are now being talked about in Native American Heritage Month in different, whether it's like public, elementary schools or high schools or colleges or, nonprofits, other organizations. There's different kind of activities that are happening. And it is about all of those things, education, teaching the indigenous folks who might, here's an example. My people were ricers. We grow rice that grows on the lakes.
This is Zania rice, not the traditional.
Yeah, I don't know what you guys call it.
Oh.
We call it monoman. And so that food has sustained my people for, 100,000 years. Well, I don't know how to harvest rice, and I don't know how to prepare it. But I can learn it now because there's lots of opportunities for me to learn it.
So it shifted from being something that people would like ooh and ah and watch a show about.
Yeah.
It was actually getting immersed and understanding the context.
Yep. And it's also helpful for the indigenous folks. Whereas before, when it was the dance thing, when it was just like showing up, that was really just to educate non-indigenous folks about us. Now we kind of use this month to help ourselves and to teach ourselves about things that we want to learn and reclaim in our communities. And so that's kind of the new evolution of what Native American Heritage Month is. You're still going to find all those different, sessions or displays in different organizations or institutions. And they're great. They're still helpful. But then there's also a whole extra, set of things that are taking place that are really super helpful for the community, indigenous and non-indigenous. And so it's really a good time.
And you also mentioned the boarding schools in terms of looking at using this as a time for reflection. You mentioned the boarding schools and the problems that came out. Are there other issues of reflection or giving voice to Native American communities that you've seen change over time?
We have several, kind of key issues amongst Indigenous people, both in the United States and Canada, that affect our people. But really the root of it comes down to this boarding school stuff. Like everything can be put on the results of the boarding school, of why we're in the positions that we're in today. And so as much as, there might be, other issues, social issues that we as Indigenous people are talking about throughout the whole year, I feel like, well, me personally, I know this month is really used more for learning, trying to make it more positive, So an example I'm talking about, there's a very huge issue with murdered and missing Indigenous women, children, and Two-Spirit. Two-Spirit is how a lot of Indigenous people call themselves if they are not heterosexual. And so it's an epidemic. There's really an epidemic, and because of issues with like tribal law and federal law and who has jurisdiction and courts and not having courts and all these things, we kind of slip through the cracks. And so that's a big issue in all Indigenous communities, where folks that we know of are missing or have been murdered, and we're not getting the help that we need in order to solve these cases. We just kind of get brushed off by law enforcement and whoever else. That's the thing that we talk about and try to work on all the time. It's not something that we might bring up probably during Native American Heritage Month, just because we're spending so much time doing all these other like really positive, kind of trying to make it, fun, educational, and a good time.
And drawing people in.
Yeah. So I would say that, there are lots of issues, but we really kind of focus on, the education and reclaiming knowledge for ourselves during this month.
And you're giving us a chance to listen to a Native American woman today, and we really appreciate that.
Yeah.
So thanks again for joining us today.
Yeah.
If folks are interested in learning more about you, I know you dropped off a couple email locations. Can you kind of just summarize those for me?
Yes. So you can email me right now at I'll give two email addresses. One is my MSU email, which is asanchez@msu.edu. But then I also have, you can go to the Noonie Project website, and I think it's just nooneyproject.com. I actually can't remember, but if you Google it,
you'll find it.
Yeah. And then you can hit email there. And we also have the Sacred Waters Collective website, sacredwaterscollective.co. You can also there's also a contact button there. But the email for that is sacredwaterscollective@outlook.com. And then my personal Facebook, I have lots of people that like come there maybe and follow me or whatever. That's totally cool. I am very true to myself on my Facebook, so sometimes
I expect nothing less.
Sometimes it's a shock for people, but that's fine. Anyway, my Facebook name is Angie ESS. Like the letter S, but spell it out right. And people can find me there. And that's about it.
Great, thanks. We'll include whatever information we can in the show notes as well for people to click on.
Okay.
Is there anything you'd like to say in your mother tongue as we close out?
No, I'm just gonna say I will say our word for see you later, because we don't have a word that says goodbye, or we don't even have a word that says thanks, but we have words that kind of mean that. So miigwech is how we would kind of say if we were saying thank you. But like I said, that's not the actual translation. And then bamapi, which is we will see you again.
Great. Thank you. So that's a wrap for this episode. Thanks for listening to Today in Geography from MSU's Department of Geography, Environment, and Spatial Sciences.
Be sure to subscribe and share. And join us next time as we continue exploring the people, places, and stories that shape the world around us.